I'm assuming we're still waiting for some more people to enter the Zoom room. I'm told that there are 38 people registered, so I think we should expect a few more.
And if you wanted to go ahead and get started, I'll continue to let people in.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm not quite sure how you would like to structure this hearing. And if you have any particular things that you would like to do during the hearing, I hope you will please let me know. I thought I would put up the PowerPoint of the budget, which is in sections on the various slides of that PowerPoint, so that you're not trying to look at the whole thing all at once. And I can do that. I will be doing that, of course, at the budget presentation on Saturday, but this would give you a preview. And if I was thinking perhaps the most efficient way would be to go through it section by section. And if you have questions or want something clarified, perhaps you can speak up and unmute yourself and ask those questions, and I'll do my best to answer them. Rick Grimshaw is on the call here on this meeting, so he may have some help in answering questions if I cannot. And I understand that the bishop is to join, but I haven't seen her yet. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen so that you can see this PowerPoint, and we'll get to the first slide. Oh, what is that? Oh, here we go. Can you all see this PowerPoint saying proposed diocesan budget for 2023?
Yes.
Everybody can see it? Great. So we have, I don't think I need to go over this right now. This is the budget development process. If anybody has any questions about that, do please speak up right away. Because I'm sharing my screen, I can only see about 4 of you, so you're going to have to speak up in order for me to know that you have a question. Nothing on that one? Okay. There's an overview slide which just talks about the budget being balanced, that it's a decrease of 30,000 over last year's budget. The cost of living increase is 3.5%, which was the amount that was specified back in probably May of this year. Medical expenses increase, dental increase a little bit. You'll see some consolidation in the budget where certain lines have been amalgamated into single lines, and I'll point that out. And if you want to know more, we can talk about that. Most requests have been funded. A few programs have been encouraged to seek EBOF funds, and one has already been funded, which is William Temple House. They've just received a very generous grant from the Episcopal Bishop of Oregon Foundation, which is what EBOF means, in case you're not familiar with that. Any questions? No. All right, this is the first part of the budget, the income. And there are some things that you might want to look at here. The Diocesan Program assessment is, of course, the bulk of the budget. It's 1.9 million out of 2.1 million. And the one line, number 2, which has changed the most from 209,000 in 2022 to 100. Oh, something happened. Sorry. This thing is a little, if you click on it, it tends to change. 209,000 down to 115,000, which is the money that comes into the diocese from the Episcopal Endowment Fund, which is a restricted fund that funds expenses related to the bishop. In 2020, the Board of Trustees agreed to fully fund the bishop's expenses, salary, benefits, etc. And that came in 2022, this year, to 209,000. But normally it only partially funds the bishop's expenses. And so this year the amount has been reduced to 115,000. So that's one of the biggest changes in the income for this for 2023. Another one that has gone down is the Triangle Lake Endowment. This is an endowment that was established after the sale of Triangle Lake Campground some years ago. And in 2022, it partially funded the Missioner for Lifelong Learning. And that was a position occupied by Carol Sedlacek. That position is ending at the end of this year, 2022, and the 13,000 is going to be used from that fund to fund a youth camp in 2023. So there's a considerable reduction there. These two are pretty much similar. The Bishop's Discretionary Fund was not used to fund the budget in 2022 because we had a surplus in that budget. But this year there was a small deficit, and that is why the Bishop's Discretionary Fund is actually funding a little bit, very small amount of this budget. And this amount is actually an EBOF grant to support one of the missioners, and that was not being supported in 2022, but it will be in the budget this year. The total budget, the total income is down about $30,000 from the 22 budget. Any questions about that? Everybody okay? All right. Now we're on to expenses. All of the next slides are all about various expenses. And the first lot are essentially our taxes, if you like. The Episcopal Church Program commitment, it's sort of like the DPA, which the diocese pays to the national church. And there's a formula by which it's calculated. And this is the amount for this year. That, by the way, these lavender shaded, this is the actual budget. This is what was started initially, but there have been, if there are adjustments, these are the numbers that were included in the proposed budget. So that is money that is required for the diocese to pay. Now, line 13, the Province 8 program support. Province 8 is about, I think it's about, I don't know how many congregations, but there are, I think, a group of dioceses in the western part of the United States that have some programs that help the diocese which contribute to it. They're in the process of reorganizing and redefining their mission. And the bishop decided not to send any money this year until they're, until they are completely organized. So that's why there is nothing in the budget this year for Province 8 support. Any questions?
And you have a question from Alan.
Okay, Alan.
Hi, Anne. This is Helen Murray from Trinity Cathedral. I'm very involved at the Province 8 I'm the Cluster 2B convener, which is the cluster that overseeing all the Truth and Reconciliation Ministry. That includes gender equity, anti-sexism, racial reconciliation, anti-racism, care of creation, peace and justice network. So I know that the province is going through some restructuring and reorganization, but the mission is still ongoing. We are not doing away with any of the ministries. Our commitment to Province 8 is to, at least during this period of reorganization, is to fund the winter talk by the indigenous people. Let's not forget that Province 8 also consists of Navajo Land Mission. And we also are committed to racial reconciliation. So I think that we are setting a really bad precedent by not funding Province 8. We have never stopped paying Province 8 assessment to fund our interdiocesan ministry. So Province 8 is made up of 900 congregations within 17 Western US dioceses, which also includes the Diocese of Taiwan and Micronesia. So there is this really global mission that we are looking at engaging in the work. So this will set a really bad precedent to say that if congregations are not happy with the diocese while doing reorganization or re-envisioning, we can withhold our DPA. And likewise, if dioceses are not happy with the direction of the Episcopal Church, we can withhold our assessment. So that is not a good precedent to set. And this biennium budget for 2023 and 2024, the Province 8 has reduced the assessment by 50%. So the asking is 0.15% of the 1% of our total income. So I do the math here. Our total budget is $2.148 and $82. 1% is $21,480, and 0.15% of that is $3,222. So that's what they're asking for to fund the 2023 mission. And I know at this time, so late in the game, it's hard to rejuggle and move the budget unless we can find somewhere to cut. So I do have a proposal. I found out from the diocesan office this week that the General Convention budget is $30,000 for a triennium. We have spent $26,807.95, which gives us a surplus of $3,192.05. So that almost covered the assessment. I'll be more than happy to write a check of $29.95 to balance the budget.
So Alan, I need to speak to that because I can tell you're really upset. And I just want to make sure that this line is not making some kind of future leaning projection or statement. But it really was in a conversation around what was going on with Province 8, confusion about the budget and what we were going to do going forward. I have no intention of withdrawing support of Province 8. I have no intention of withdrawing support from Province 8. We will find a way to support the work. There were some concerns about the way in which it was being managed. So what I was wanting to do was waiting until we had clarity about how we were proceeding. So, and thank you for your work and your support of the Ministry of Province 8. I understand it's very important, particularly in this geographical region of the entire church.
Thank you, Bishop, for the clarification. So what you are saying is that if there is some sense of clarity in the restructuring process in 2023, we will find money to fund that. Is that?
Yes, and I've already talked to Gretchen Rayberg about this. So
Okay.
we're setting in motion how we're gonna meet that.
Thank you for the clarification. I'm really thrilled to hear that.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I believe Maureen Hagan has a question or comment.
And I'm also involved, I am in the cluster head for convener for education and formation for Province 8. And the challenge of not receiving any money for this year is that both the campus ministries and the education aspects, they depend on that money for their programs. Oregon has received a lot of money from Province 8 for their programs in the educational area. And so if there is no money going forward, Ali will have to let people know that there will be no money for their programs, at least from us. So that is an issue, because there are a lot of requests right now for 2023, and they need to know right now to be able to plan for those events.
So I can just repeat what I said, Maureen.
Right. No, I heard what you say, but it sounds, so is there money set aside that once it's what I just don't have clarity myself about what to tell the people who are doing those programs.
Well, my understanding is pretty much all the dioceses and in Province 8 are preparing to pay the assessment. So
It's only Oregon.
However, Province 8 is managing its budget to support its programs, that's going forward.
Okay, last time I looked at the budget, I think they were counting on Oregon making its contribution, but if it's only Oregon that's withdrawing, then they probably can accommodate the programs through other dioceses.
So let me repeat myself. Oregon
Yeah.
is not withdrawing its support. I understand that it looks that way in the budget, but it's not. And there will be a contribution in 2023.
Thank you so much. That I appreciate that. Okay, that's very, very clear. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone who contributed to that discussion. Are there any other questions or comments? Oh, Cheryl Gardner.
Thank you. I'm just curious if this means that next year's contribution will be a double contribution. I'm unclear on whether it's an assessment or a voluntary contribution.
Are we still talking about Province 8?
Yes.
It won't be a double assessment. It will be the formula that Alan Murray just shared with us.
Thank you, Bishop.
Are there any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I will move on. This is a very full slide, and perhaps I should have divided it into two, but it really is the expenses for salary benefits for all of the people who work directly for the diocese. The diocesan staff work in the diocesan office. Well, not all in the diocesan office, because some of the missioners down in line 31, for instance, 31, are not working directly in the office, but more out in within their churches. So there are a couple of things I would like to say about this. Lines 19 and 20, which are, I'm so sorry about this. It seems like every time I put my arrow on it, it changes the slide. I'll try not to do that. The lines 19 and 20 are the Missioner for Thriving Congregations. This was a relatively new position, and it replaced Nisa Elgrin's canon to the ordinary position, which was in the budget previously. And so in 2022. That could have been shown here, that it was not being funded in 23 and that it was funded in 22, but to try and make this a more reasonable slide, I took those two lines out. So you can see that lines 19 and 20 were not in the 22 budget, but they are in the 23 budget. And also the Missioner for Lifelong Formation, which is Derek Moyer. his position was also not in the budget in 2022. The other ones are more standard, that's same as this year's budget 2022, except line 27, where the Missioner for Special Projects position ends at the end of this year, so it's not in the 2023 budget. I think the East Side Missioner has left the diocese. That position is not being filled immediately, but the church that he was leading, they are still being provided with a priest, and that position, and maybe the bishop wants to talk more about this, but that position will be maybe changed a little bit, but is not gone forever.
Yes, that's correct. The position is going to be supported by Beto Arciniega, who is the missioner for Latino ministry. I've asked him to, we're kind of resorting his job responsibilities so that he can help that congregation as we figure out how to rearrange how we're serving these various congregations with the limited resources that we have.
Okay, are there any questions about anything in this section of the budget? I'm not seeing any, so I will move on. The next section of the budget is the non-salary expenses for the diocesan office. And these are not too different from the previous year, a little bit up from 2022 to 23. Some of these numbers have changed because some functions have been moved from one line to another. For instance, this line 37 included phone and internet, and that has been moved to communication expenses, so that that you see a negative change here and a positive change here, but it's simply shifting of the functions from one place to another. So, and of course, some of them are simply increased amounts from due to increases in what it costs to do things. So that's the small changes that you see. Are there any questions about this section?
I'm sorry, I can't find the hand raise icon. They've moved it. I have actually a question about the previous slide about the salaries. My question is about the cost of living increase,
All right.
which, and I think there's probably people on here who know more than I do, but I have always used the Social Security cost of living increase to calculate salaries. And I'm wondering whether that was used. I'm wondering why we're giving a 3.5% cost of living increase rather than 8.7.
Because we can't afford it.
I think it was also partly because back in May, it was not anticipated that the cost of living would, or inflation would have gone up to the extent that it has. There is one thing, I've seen questions about this before, and that is that it looks like some of these numbers are not 3% increases. But in fact, if they don't look like it, it's because their benefits have changed. I did actually go back into the back calculations for all these numbers and look at them, and all of the salaries were increased by 3.5%. So if you think they are not really being given that increase, it's because their benefits have changed.
And this is a little hard to get a total understanding of, because these salaries and benefits have been combined. And I think next year we're going to separate them out because it's easy to read that and make it and assume that I'm making $217,000 a year, which I am definitely not. But a lot of people don't understand how much our benefits are.
I think they can be at least 60% of salary and
Yeah.
sometimes more.
But yeah, just to reinforce what Ann said, the 3.5 increase was calculated before that 8 point something figure came out. But even if it came out when we were putting this together, it would be, we just couldn't do it. We couldn't afford it.
I believe Don has a question. Don Metheny.
Yes, a comment, actually. It's on the cost of living increases. In the past, they were always based on a 5-year rolling wave. And so in years when inflation went down, we'd actually be paying more than the cost of living. Unfortunately, on years when it goes up sharply like it did this year, the rolling average is still fairly low. So it tends to even out our budget over the years to do that. And I assume we're still following that.
I did not get that information from the controller this year, but we've had 3 controllers already this year, and that has made communication somewhat difficult. Okay, may I go on to the next slide now? Anybody else have anything else they want to say about this?
Don, would you be willing to put that in an email and send it to me?
Certainly, Bishop, I'll do that tonight.
Thank you.
So I'm going to go on to the next slide.
So, Ann, it's Rick. There's one other thing, and that is the medical benefits and the benefits for each position depends on what their family needs are. So they're not level across the board. Because
Right.
some staff already have their own plans from their spouses. So I agree with the bishop. It's hard to interpret when you just see one lump number.
Yes, and some are family coverage and some are individual coverages, I believe. So that makes a big difference too. Okay. I'm going to go on to diocesan programs, and this I've separated out into 4 different slides, and there's nothing more than arbitrary decision to divide them up this way. So please don't read anything into the grouping. I just took the first number that I thought you could read on the screen. In this case, there are a couple of things going on in the 2023 budget, and they can be seen here in line 47, where the Commission on Liturgy and Music has their expenses have been moved to line 55, which is Diocesan Commission and Working Group Travel and Expenses. There are 5 lines in the budget that have been consolidated into line 55. So you'll see that again. You see it here for the Youth Ministry Commission. And there are a couple of others that are on other slides. What I can tell you is that the amount of money in line 55, which is 20,400 in this budget, is larger than the sum of those 5 lines in the 22 budget. So money is not being cut from these expenses, it's just being consolidated. So I want to make that point. The second point is you'll see line 48 here, Ministry of Lifelong Formation. Several entities in the 2022 budget have been combined into Commission on Ministry line, which is line 68, which you'll see soon. So that's when you see it before you were supposed to. This is this line here you see is not funded as it was in 2022. This I am not doing anything. This is what this is doing to me, and I'm pretty frustrated. Anyway, I don't know why it's so fragile. So in the case of Curcio, line 52, there was no application for funding. So if are there any questions about this section of the diocesan programs? Hearing none, I will move on. So here you will see that the budget is quite similar to the budget in 2022. There are no lines in this particular part of the budget where things have been consolidated, so you won't see them there. The Ministry in Higher Education, PSU, is still on hold. It is being reimagined, and down the road there will be a Ministry in Higher Education. Maybe, well, I should not put any personal information here, but it's something that is not abandoned. It simply isn't being done immediately. So that hopefully will come in the next little while. Other than that, I think everything on this page is pretty much the same, except for lines 65 and 66. Well, actually 64 through 66. As you know, the Lambeth Conference, which is every 10 years in the United Kingdom, we set aside money each year in a reserve account, and that is used when the next time comes around. The General Convention Deputy Reserve and the ECW General Convention Triennial Reserve, money is put aside for 3 years and then is used the next year in order to, or I think it's put aside for 3 years, but it's used in the third year to send deputies to General Convention. So there was a General Convention this year, and so there is $30,000 in the budget to cover the expenses for this year. Next year, 2023, we will set aside what we normally set aside, $10,000 and $850. And there will be a $1,500 set aside for the Lambeth Conference, assuming that will accumulate over the next 10 years. So that this is what was in the budget for 2022 and what will be hopefully in the budget for 2023. The actuals, that is the actual amount that was used in 2022, may be different than the numbers in the budget. And those are not available, at least to me at this time. So I don't think that I can't tell you how much of that actually was used. As you know, the bishop was unable to go to the Lambeth Conference this year. And but whether all those expenses were reimbursed or not is something I don't know about yet. I have asked that question, but it's not available to me. Are there any questions that you have about this section? Beth Ferguson.
Yeah, actually, it's on the previous slide. Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry to make you have to maneuver this PowerPoint that's given you
All right. I'm learning.
Well, good. I'm glad you have a good mindset about it. I guess my question, and I may have missed this someplace, but the lines that were consolidated, what was the reason for consolidating those? Is it to make them more flexible? I'm not sure why that happened.
Well, in the case of line 55, which is the expenses for diocesan commissions and working groups, it was decided that they would not have budgets of their own exactly, but if they have expenses, they would ask for reimbursement against line 55. And so it's not, well, what else do I need to say? Probably nothing. Okay. Are you done, Beth? Or you have
yes, I guess I'm just wondering, so is it kind of then somebody would say, is there some sort of approval process then for things that would be funded? And then, sorry, the pot is empty now, there's no more money. Like, how does that, how are things prioritized?
I asked that question of the bishop, and she responded that money will be found for legitimate expenses.
Okay, thank you.
So, and
Carolyn.
yes, there will be a request for reimbursement.
Thank you.
Carolyn,
I had a concern about the consolidation as well. My concern has more to do with the fact that when the item appears in the budget, in the past has appeared in the budget, then with some kind of funding, that tells us something about the priorities of the diocese. And so consolidating things, and I'm particularly concerned about youth ministry being rolled into this. Consolidating this removes or makes invisible the fact that we may still care about youth ministry. And I think youth ministry is a vitally important aspect of our life together as a diocese.
I understand what you're saying, Carolyn. I don't know, Diana, Bishop Akiyama, would you like to respond to that?
Sure. You know, I hear what you're saying, and I would hate to think that you have to be in the budget to be meaningful or valued. I think, you know, and we have all of these commissions write reports to the convention so that we can know about what they've been doing in the past year. So I don't think it's the case that not being listed in the budget means that you've become invisible. It really is a way to be more efficient with the way that we are supporting the work of these various groups.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Bishop. Any other questions about this slide? And we'll go back to the second slide in the programs. Were there any questions about any of the lines here?
I was just wondering, is there anything for EYE in the budget? Because it looks like it would be on this page.
There's nothing specific for EYE. I could see it going into a number of existing categories. Some of the youth, probably the youth commission perhaps, or something that comes under the missioner for thriving congregations. Chris Cron is moving very creatively around youth ministry in the diocese. And so that's going to be one of her priorities in terms of her work. And so I think we're going to be able to find funds for EYE. We're definitely sending people.
Great, that's wonderful.
Okay, anything else about this second part of the diocesan programs? Okay, this third part shows most of the consolidation from lines 69 and 71 and 72 into line 68, which is the Commission on Ministry. This is the work that Derek Moyer is in charge of. And what you will see here is that the budget for his line, this line 68, has gone from 2,500 to 5,200 this year. And again, you know, having the mindset that I do, I added up all the lines that were being consolidated into line 68 from the 2022 budget, and they were less than the 52,540. So there are no cuts here. It's simply a way of consolidating all the ministry, whether it's ordained or baptized or other educational things such as the Academy for Formation and Mission, the ordination expense, all the things relating to formation are now all under the Commission on Ministry, and the budget reflects that. Are there any questions about this section of the budget? No? All right. So this is the last slide about the budget. You'll be glad to hear. You see that there are certain lines here, 77, 78, 79, 80. Two of those are being combined into line 55. That's the expense line for commissions and working groups. Ministry and prison is not being funded from this budget, but they are being encouraged to apply for a multi-year funding from the Episcopal Bishop of Oregon Foundation. William Temple House has already been funded by EBOF grant, and for, I believe it's a $25,000 grant for 3 years. So set up against the $3,000 they were getting from the budget this year, that's must be good news for them. So in fact, I know they're delighted about that because I talked to the development officer there. So the subtotal for diocesan programs is here, and it has been reduced, but that's mostly because of the EBOF funding situations. And the total budget here is the same, it's balanced, it's the same as the income. You'll see that last year we did have 60,000 that we were able to put into reserves. This year we were not able to do that because the budget had to be balanced using a small amount of money from the bishop's discretionary fund. So there was no surplus or deficit. It is a balanced budget. Any questions here? No, everybody okay with that? Well, I just had a couple of thoughts about the future. As always, a budget is a snapshot in time of the best estimates of what's going to happen in the for the future year. But those things can change. Things can change, and that means that the way the money is spent may be different from what it is in the budget, and that can happen if diocesan office staff changes or for any number of other reasons. So that's just a sort of cautionary that the budget is not set in concrete and is something which is a best estimate of at the time. And just a reminder, we've already gone over this tonight, that money will be set aside yearly for the Lambeth Conference General Convention and the ECW Triennial. So that comes out of the budget and is put into reserve accounts until the time that those events actually take place. And then the money is dispersed. Also, something that we in the management committee of Diocesan Council are working on quite hard, and we've had some meetings in the last couple of weeks, is to shorten up the period of the budget process, which I think will have the advantage that those who are applying for funds for the following year will do so somewhat later in the years than they have in the past, which will mean that they will have a somewhat better idea of what they're going to be doing the following year. If they have to make their application in April for the following year, they may not have done very much with their current year's budget. So we're trying to shorten it up. One of the reasons that this subcommittee that I'm working with thinks this is reasonable is that we're in a different communication era now than we were 40 years ago, even 20 years ago. We don't put things up with push pins on notice boards and use snail mail very much anymore. And we're using email, we're using Zoom meetings. We can make things happen quite a bit more quickly. And that is the philosophy that we are taking in redeveloping the budget timeline. Now, we know that there are canons and other sort of rules that we will designate how long before convention a budget has to be posted. For instance, we know that 45 days is the minimum to post a budget prior to the annual meeting or convention. But we have been given permission from the bishop and also the chancellor of the diocese to have a year of experiment where we shorten up some of these periods of time. And so we are going to try and do that. We're going to have an experimental year in 2023 to develop the 2024 budget. And that has been, we have been given permission to do that. And so I hope that people will accept this in the spirit in which it will be offered, which is as an experiment, not something that we've changed forever and ever. But we will ask to change the canons if that seems to be the right thing to do. Okay, Carolyn, you have a question or comment?
Yes, I certainly appreciate and welcome the idea of a year of experimentation here. However, in the course of doing that, I would hope that one thing would still be considered, or at least considered in the evaluation of the process going forward. And that's that in the past, this may have been changed a couple of years ago, but from 2009 coming forward, there was a resolution of the convention that the convocations needed to see a draft budget in time to suggest revisions before the final budget came out. There were specific dates to that, but I won't go into that. That doesn't matter. But the fundamental point was that there was a feedback loop that was built into the process so that we could see a draft budget and have a chance to say, well, I don't think you considered X or Y. Please go back and see if you can find money for this. It's really important. And in many cases, that happened. And the final budget reflected changes that came from the convocations during that feedback process. So I would hope that in the course of the experimental year, that keeping a feedback process in the scheme of things would be a priority.
I can respond to that. We do know that feedback process is important, and it worked pretty well this year, especially from East Metro convocation.
Mm-hmm.
And so we expect to build that in, but it may be a shorter time to do that.
Certainly.
And one of the things that I think we're hoping will happen is that the deans and presidents of convocations will get some information. I hate to call it education, but they will be given some sort of guidelines about when to hold meetings and not to delay them for 6 weeks and then hold a meeting, and which is what tends to happen at this time. Not for all convocations, but for some. So yes, we have that. We have your concern in mind, and we're not trying to eliminate that process.
Wonderful, thank you.
You're welcome. Alicia.
Hi, I had a question going back to the beginning of the presentation. I don't know if you want to go back to that at the end, or and I'll send my question in the chat as well, because there are a lot of numbers and it's kind of reading them out loud can be kind of hard for people to understand.
Which part of the budget were you looking at?
Yeah, so in the income section, when I add up the 22 income rows 1 through 8, I get a different number. And I was wondering if I'm reading it wrong, if there's a calculation error, or if there's something missing from the 2022 income.
Did you count line 9?
Yeah, so
income and transfers. I haven't gone through everyone and hand calculated. I assume that the that the spreadsheet is correct, but
Oh,
perhaps it isn't.
okay, sorry about that. I was looking at the budget draft document, and it didn't have that line with the other income and transfers, and so that
Oh, it didn't?
answers my question.
Should have. Yeah, I can talk about other income and transfers for 2022 if you're interested. That box, that particular number, 41,000, is the money that's transferred, mainly the money that's transferred out of the reserve accounts back into the budget in the year that the activity is going to take place.
Gotcha.
In 2022, it also included some money that the Board of Trustees allotted to the budget to enable the bishop to go to the Lambeth conference. So that is where what that 41,000 is.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I was adding up lines 1 through 8, and I was getting a difference of $41,600, and I
Right. Well,
was trying to figure out where that was coming from.
Well, I'm glad you got 41,600 because that says that our spreadsheet is probably working.
Yeah, thank you.
You are welcome. Any other questions about any part of the budget or its process? No?
This is Sandra Noble from St. Tim, Salem. When in looking at the diocesan convention line, is that budget amount with the hope that we will have an in-person convention next fall?
I think you'd have to ask the bishop that question.
We haven't even thought that far, to be honest.
Okay.
That's line 56 at the bottom
56,
of this
yes.
table. Yes.
That's covered in the narrative, and I think it says we are planning to have in-person meeting.
I just think it's so important that we have the chance to develop that community that has been kind of on hold for a while, and to get to know each other, and especially when it comes to electing officials. There are so many people that you may see them in a box on Zoom, but do you really know who they are and how to vote? And so those were just some concerns.
Bishop Akiyama, would you like to talk about the in-person gatherings that you have planned for early next year?
So one of the ideas that we've been working on is finding a way for the diocese to come together in a way that is more inclusive. So right now, the way the annual meeting of the convention works is that it's mostly clergy and delegates. Well, that's primarily who comes. And from my perspective, it would be really nice to have an event where the entire diocese is invited, whether or not you are a delegate and whether or not you're a clergy. And so we're hoping to put together an event in the spring around the theme of renewal. That would be a bigger opportunity for us to come together, to worship together, to have fun together, and to learn about the various things that all the faith communities are doing. And unfortunately, the way we were trying to reserve, meaning we needed a big space, was not available in the spring of 2022. I mean, 23. It's available in spring of 2024. So that means it's pushed out over a year ahead of us. But that's part of our thinking around that theme that you just articulated, Sandra, which is, we need to come together as a community, and we do. And I've become less ashamed of saying to folks, I've been bishop for about 18 months. I have yet to have any opportunity to feel this diocese as a whole community, because there's been no event that we have come together as a diocese. So I definitely feel that desire and that need.
Are there any other comments or questions?
Thank you, Bishop.
I'm not hearing any. Bishop, would you like to just pray us out of this meeting?
Absolutely. The Lord be with you.
So with you.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, in you we live and move and have our being. We humbly pray you so to guide and govern us by your Holy Spirit, that in all the cares and occupations of our life, we may not forget you, but may remember that we are ever walking in your sight. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you all for making time at your dinner time to get together and talk about money.